Hello and welcome to the Alchemist's Inkwell.
This is your spiritual podcast for grounded people.
I'm Emily.
And I'm KristaLyn, and it's November.
Ta-da! We've made it. And I have to apologize in advance. My voice is all wonky. I'm not feeling super great right now. So if I sound raspy and kind of quiet, that's why.
Demure.
It's all a ploy to get you to like me more. Not really. It's
Oh, so we survived eclipse season this round.
a lot of us did survive it. Yep.
That's good point. My apologies.
No, I was saying that too, and I was like, actually, I can't say that anymore.
Mhm.
A lot of us did, but a lot of us didn't.
Yeah.
Um, Clips round, this round it was a lot. It was a lot because it was the ending of a series of eclipses and the start of a series of eclipses. It was just like,
Well, I was having a discussion with other astrologers this morning on it. And it's just, I think it's like you said, because you know how like when one tide is going out and the other one's coming in, and there's this whirlpool effect of like
mm-hmm,
chaos. um as we're focusing our energies from things that were Scorpio, Taurus nature to now
mm-hmm,
getting into Libra and Aries nature, still Mars and Venus for another 2 years, ironically,
mm-hmm.
but much different. And it's just
Yeah.
so crazy to be able to like really witness consciously that topic change. It's like same people are talking, but they've changed the subject they're talking about
Mm-hmm.
drastically. And it
Yep.
wasn't like a smooth segue at all.
No, it was not.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, before this eclipse season, there were certain things that I felt like comfortable about and confident about, and I feel like those things have been rocked to the core through this eclipse season, and I think that is the overall general theme of how this eclipse season presented. Basically, over the month of October, even if you didn't follow the eclipses, even if you weren't super tuned into it, even if you like listen to the podcast and you're like, it's cool eclipses, but you didn't necessarily pay attention to it. And we talked about this at the very beginning. Your worldview will have shifted by the end. I think we said that in the very first
Mm-hmm.
podcast episode we did in October. We were like, at the end of October, your perception of reality will be different. And
Mm-hmm.
that sure as hell happened for everybody in some way.
Yeah,
In some way.
man, I have been going through such a challenging past few years that
Mm,
this year, I'm someone that like my relationship to the divine, who I name God, is is very close. Like I hear the voice and I get conversations, and I'm so lucky
mm,
that I have that ability to connect that way. But this year I was just like, you know what? Even though we talk, you're kind of a jerk. And I'm kind
mhm,
of done being treated this way. And I actually gave myself permission, as I do. Like I always give myself permission to stop doing what I'm doing and do something different. I
mhm.
always reserve the right to change my mind, even if it comes to my faith.
Yeah.
And at one point, I was like, cool, you've put me at rock bottom with you, which means
Mhm,
something needs to change and I need to know what it was. And I found my answers, and I'm rebuilding slowly but surely. Like everything, when you
mhm.
rebuild trust, it's one bite at a time. So if anybody else is feeling that way too, don't be hard on yourself, and don't be like, any disappointment you feel or any fear you feel likely is some kind of belief that came from childhood that tells you you have to maintain the same beliefs for all of your life. That's not how
Yeah.
relationships work. They grow and they
No.
evolve. Um,
Oh, yeah. I will also say, like, I have a big fear or had a big fear about that when I first started really doing a lot of public facing content stuff, because obviously, I mean, I blew up on TikTok really, really fast.
yep.
And I'm not upset about that. This is just a little aside, but my article in Psychic News, the magazine, is out pretty much this week. You guys can look it up, Psychic
That's for
News
Emily.
magazine.
I hope you can hear
I'm in
these.
there. Anyway, it's really cool. But I got really excited about that. But beside the point, when I started doing that and actually like, presenting myself in that way, I was like, wow, one of my biggest facets is that I change my mind. I get new information and I evolve with that new information.
Mhm.
And it's really scary with the way that modern day interactions with people's opinions and thoughts go, where, and not the saying like, oh, I had a bunch of problematic opinions before. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is oh, if I believed this one thing about spirit guides and I spoke about that extensively, and then I got new information about that from guides, channeled that in, whatever. Now
Mhm.
I'd have to be like, hey, actually, this is more like this. I've got new information. And the way that social media works is people don't usually get a full story or a full arc unless they're watching every single one of your videos.
Yes.
So they might get one snippet over here and one snippet over here. And now all of a sudden I appear wishy-washy because I've changed my perception of something. So I had to overcome a lot of blocks and fears about that, a couple years ago when I really started doing a lot of social media based stuff because I
Mhm.
was like, well, at the end of the day, I can be authentic to myself and that's it. And if people miss that, that's on them and I can only do what I can do. But that is a big thing. It's a big, scary thing, especially if you I've said so adamantly your beliefs for a really long time. Anyone who's ever deconstructed any type of Christianity or even values around Christianity can tell you this. It's like it's very scary to just come out and be like, actually, all those things I said, I don't believe those, or I don't believe them in the same way anymore, or I have these other things. So your point about giving permission to yourself to change your relationship with things, to have different values, if those different values come, it's totally fine and valid. We're
Mhm.
humans and we're not supposed to have this one consistent thing forever. That's not how life exists or works. It's actually unhealthy because then that means that one thing had to sustain you through every single thing of part of your life, and you're a different person from one day to the next sometimes. So I think that's a really valuable point.
Hey, you guys, star or favorite this episode so that you can come back and listen to what Emily just said whenever you need to, because I feel like you just gave us all an activation right there.
Oh, thank
And
you.
please feel free to share this with anybody you guys feel needs to hear it because that was flawless. So thank you for sharing
Oh,
that with us, Em.
oh, that's really sweet of you. Thank you. I
From
mean, it was
one
truly
formerly
because of your
problematic
prompting.
Christian to you who are saying
Yeah.
exactly the correct thing.
Well,
Yeah.
I feel like I had a really unique relationship with religion growing up because even though my family is very, very Catholic, all of my mom's side is very, very Catholic. My dad's side actually isn't, but he's now converted to Catholicism, was very much raised in the church. It wasn't in a way where we were ever told a single time that someone else needs to have the same values that we do. My
Mhm.
mom has never said that. My dad has never said that ever. And if someone else believes something different, they'd always be like, oh, well, what do they believe? Why do you think they believe that? Is that interesting to you? They would always talk to me about it, despite the fact that I think that is obviously not the church's stance. That was our stance. And I think that I have a really unique perspective because of that. So I really respect my parents and the way they raised us within the church because I think it gave a lot of that permission to like change your beliefs over time and that being okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
And speaking of, that's kind of what we wanted to talk about on this podcast episode. Anyway,
yeah.
as we're coming into November, there's a lot of different things coming up with the holiday season.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's so appropriate. When I was in high school and stuff, it was a hot topic to call it the holiday season. But it is, it's a holiday season because there's not just one going on, you know?
Oh, there's so
So
many.
I know there's so many. And you know what? That's the most beautiful thing I can think of
Mm-hmm.
because you get to understand that somehow throughout history, throughout places in the world, and every separation we could have had, some civilizations recognized the change that was going on in nature, saw divinity in it, and all kind of got the memo to really honor that in their own
Mm-hmm.
ways and to remember what needed remembering and to celebrate what should be celebrated.
Mm.
And I think that's absolutely beautiful, however you do it.
Yeah.
Um, and to that point, if you're feeling kind of like in the middle or like you're almost creating a new worldview for yourself out of multiple different opinions and
Mm-hmm.
thoughts and traditions, that's kind of what we wanted to talk about on today's podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. I think partly with the changes that have happened in the world over the last almost 4 years, because that's where we're at. We're almost
Mhm.
4 years post-pandemic, which is wild. Um, but basically, with all the changes that have happened over the last almost 4 years, a lot of people are having a little bit of a crisis of identity, and a lot of that crisis of identity not only comes from like perspective shifting and changing, but also from like tradition, things that held a lot of meaning and tradition for you don't necessarily feel aligned anymore. I went through this very deeply with the 4th of July because that always used to be my favorite holiday. Because everyone would come to my house for the 4th of July, all my family and everyone, and that would be amazing. When changes happened, obviously, a whole bunch of crappy shit with the government happened. I'm like, I don't want to celebrate this thing anymore. So what can I do instead? And a lot of people are feeling the same way, where they're like, oh, I want to honor these traditions because they always made me feel really good. However, now these traditions feel inauthentic for my current belief system, or maybe with the current relationship you have with your family, or maybe a million other different reasons. So we just wanted to talk a little bit about like, hey, how you can incorporate different elements of you into traditions to still keep that nostalgic feeling, but have it feel more in alignment.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and
Sorry.
honest is everything okay?
Someone pulled up to my house just then. I was like, well, that's weird.
Um, and there's two questions in my mind that immediately come up with stuff like that. It's, I'm a very permission oriented person. I always talk about that. And there are some practices that are considered closed. That doesn't mean that you can never access them. If you're
Mhm,
invited to be a part of it and you can ask for invitation,
mhm.
fantastic. And if you didn't know until recently, there are ways to make sure that that unfolds in a respectful way, right? So I think that that's one thing to keep in mind is like, is this a closed practice? And if it really resonates with me, do I have an invitation? Is there any way that I can
Right.
respectfully work with that? Um, but so many things are not closed practices. So many things are not. And
Mhm.
so if you find something that resonates with you, often, and I hope I'm speaking to a lot of us out there, you'll do something and then something else comes along and shows you that that's a thing. Like it's not something you just made up. You're not alone. There's a whole community around that. My phone just went
Yeah.
off. So hopefully that does help people. Um, but find the things that work for you. And you know what? Make it up on your own. If you find a tradition that works, awesome. But if you make it up on your own and then you find that there is a tradition that really fits what you've been doing that feels authentic to you,
Mhm.
all the, beauty to that as well.
Yeah. I think that's an important kind of point to make too. Well, I'll also say, like, when you look at your traditional things, I always recommend, like, look at the parts of it that you
Mhm.
like, that still feel authentic, and then figure out how you can incorporate those parts into something else. Because you can take bits and pieces and make something new. New traditions still have as much value, and they can still have as much ritual. They can still have as much family space or whatever it is that brings that like love into your heart or the thing that made you want to do the tradition in the first place. The tradition as a whole might not be aligned anymore, but that piece might feel very aligned. So it's
Mhm.
important to kind of think of it more modular and less as a whole cohesive experience. For example, this year, my last year at the end of Thanksgiving with my family, um, we all were sitting around and we're all like, I can't eat most of the food already because I'm basically vegan. And my family and all, I were all just like, do we even like this food? Like, why are we doing this? And basically, even my kids were like, no, none of us like this. Let's enjoy this meal. Like, we get it 3 different times because we'll do it ourselves with like a Friendsgiving situation, then we'll do it with my family, and then we'll do it with Weston's family. And like, we do it so much that we're like, not really into this, actually. We don't want this food. So this year we're doing a chili, make your own chili sort of thing night, like a chili cook-off with the whole family
Yeah.
for Thanksgiving instead, because that's the part of the tradition that matters is that you're doing it with family. And it doesn't need to be something that we all don't like to eat. But it's just that like little reassessing to like make the things you do match who you are now
Mhm.
instead of feeling like you have to go back in time 10 years in order to be that old version of yourself to enjoy what you're doing. Like that's not fair.
Yeah. And to your point, like my husband's family does this great thing where Thanksgiving is more about the side dishes. So they've
Hmm.
got tons of side dishes that they have, and it's just this smorgasbord. And I love that tradition. And
Hmm.
the one thing I always keep though is I make the green bean casserole because I have a special way I make it. And I always hope that not a lot of people take it because whatever's left over is my dinner. I'm very excited about that. But there's one thing I keep that I always looked forward to and loved. And then every other time it's like these different side dishes that my that family is really great too because they keep in mind that we're vegetarian and
Hmm.
mostly vegan. So they'll be like, here's this. There's more vegetables there than you would expect to see at a table in America. um, and then you go elsewhere and it's like potatoes, turkey, and stuffing. Yay. And I'm just like, what? Cool. I'll bring something. Don't worry. Um,
Hmm.
but I think, it's do you do it because that's how it's always been done? Or do you do it because it lights you up?
Yeah, exactly. And also if you're in a space, and I know a lot of people are in this place, which is why I'm addressing it. If you're not in this space, that's totally fine. This does not need to apply to you, or you can apply
Mhm.
it to yourself in your own way. But if you're in a space where you're actually like, I actually don't want to go see my family for the holidays. I don't want to be around them right now, which is really hard. It's a hard place to be, no matter how good you are about that decision. And it might be for a variety of different reasons. A couple of years ago, we decided we will not go to my parents' house on Christmas Day or Weston's mom's house on Christmas Day. Christmas Day is just for us to stay in our PJs all day and hang out. I was someone who was raised going to church, so you'd get a little bit of time on Christmas Day and then you'd get up and you'd go to church. And like that was never fun. And like, so we decided, like, no, this is just going to be an at-home family thing. So whatever reason that you're doing it, it still can be kind of weird and kind of hard because you're like, oh, I'm so used to doing this with family stuff. Or maybe you're having a really hard time with your family right now, which a lot of people are. A lot of people are really having issues with older values versus new values and things like that.
Mhm.
Um, those elements, don't feel that pressure that like, oh, whatever we do isn't going to be as magical as I felt it was when I was a kid or when, we used to do this because it always felt so magical. You can make something 10 times more magical. Just get creative, have fun with it, brainstorm about it. What feels more authentic to you? What would be a joy for you to do? And kind of coming at it with a place of what would actually make me feel happy versus what would make me feel traditional will help you make traditions that will make you feel happy.
Yeah.
Hope you
Well,
feel
and
good.
we're much more aware of magic now too.
Hmm.
Things felt magical because we believed that things were possible, and it seemed like people were caring for each other unconditionally. And that to me, when I look back, is like everybody was just loving everybody,
Yeah.
at least those times of the year, right?
Hmm.
And so it's like no matter what else was going on, we were given the permission and the space to be happy and to accept each other and to all do all these things. And then as we
Yep.
grew, everybody, kind of we're a little bit different, we understood things differently. We knew more than we did as kids and whatever. But I am adamant, with the lifestyles that we all lead, and we're running an entire conference to showcase this.
Yeah.
There will be magic, real magic, like the actual kind of magic that you can do and that you are always capable of, infused into everything I do. And that
Yeah.
includes the holidays, and especially the holidays, because they're even more magical when you realize what they are. They're the
Hmm.
turning of a season, or they're the, reclaiming of the light. If you're thinking about Yule and Christmas and that kind of thing,
Hmm.
or, the harvest and the permission to rest when nature rests, that sigh as you
Hmm.
fall asleep or whatever. The remembrance of things that came before and doing it in solidarity and in the companionship of other people who get you. That's
Hmm.
important.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's super duper important. And that's the other thing. If you're like, you can go two different ways with traditional stuff too.
Mhm.
Because if you're like, okay, my new belief system, I want to do more, witch-based things or solstice-based things or whatever, rock on, do something around the solstice. One of my kids' favorite holiday traditions, which we've done for a bonus video on the Patreon, is making pomanders on the
Mhm.
winter solstice. We do it every winter solstice. This year, it's keep in mind, it's November. We have like a month and a half to the solstice. And yesterday, my daughter comes in and she's like, Mom, we better make sure that our wood burning stove is up and going for the solstice so we can burn our pomanders. Cause like, I'm like, yep, because we haven't had a fire in it yet because we need to get it like cleaned and whatever. We just moved in, and I'm like, yep, we will. We'll make sure it's up and going. She's like, we have to have a fire. I'm like, we will have a fire for this. So you can do stuff that way that aligns more with your values in that kind of capacity. And that comes from, my old practice of Hellenic polytheism, where I was practicing Hellenismos, and that's what they like the ancient like Hellas religion and the modern revival of that says to do is to make these pomanders, and it always felt really aligned to me. There's a bunch of other holidays I used to celebrate. I don't have to celebrate anymore. No more tradition there. But there's that was really aligned for me. Or you can do things that are silly. Like you don't have to have things that mean something that deeply to have it mean something to you. Like I always think about like the UK Boxing Day
Mhm.
kind of traditions because it's literally just the day where you have a bunch of boxes and you're getting rid of them because you opened presents the day before. It's a silly tradition, but you can do your own thing in that way. Like you can make your own, and it could be on a random Tuesday that you decide is going to be a special day for you every year on that random Tuesday for whatever reason. And it's such a more high vibe thing to do because it's actually inserting yourself into your life, which we have a huge habit of removing ourselves from our own lives, which sounds ridiculous, but this is the time of year where people feel that, where they're like, I don't have any control over my life because everybody else takes it because I need to show up for this obligation and that obligation and then the work party and blah, 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 blah. When it's like, well, it's still yours. You still have this sovereignty. And so it's kind of reinserting that into your space so that we stop doing that to ourselves.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean,
So
life is
when
a
in doubt, go
full
silly.
right? I would say life is a full participation sport.
Hmm.
And
Right.
you can imagine that you're on the bench, or you can try to put yourself on the bench, but that's still your life.
Yeah.
And I think, what you're saying is really important to remember, that like you are the main player on your team. So don't take yourself out of the game.
Yep. Totally just had the Backstreet Boy. You are come back. Like right as you said that, I don't know why. I was like, that's mean.
Love-
Why are we doing
Oh,
this?
90s karaoke needs to happen sometime soon.
Right? If I could sing again. My throat hurts. Anyway. Uh, and I will say too, if there was things that you did, I've actually come across this a couple different times. If there's things you did while we were in lockdown that you freaking loved. 'Cause so many people loved so many things we did during lockdown. And it was a time I look back very nostalgically
Mhm.
on the lockdown time because it was really cool. Like there was so many things that I got to do with like my kids being home all the time and whatever, you name it, all happening at once. Sorry, there was a guy, I don't know what he's doing, but it's like water line work or something out right in front of my house right now, making all sorts of noise. So sorry if you guys can hear that.
Yeah,
Really well
you're
timed.
good.
Um, but anyway, so that's why we still do our Halloween party with the kids all day Halloween, because that's was something we did during the pandemic. And the kids were like, "Can we please do this every time?" We're like, "We can do this every time. Like, let's do that."
Mhm.
Because that's that. So if there's something where you're like, if you look back on nostalgically on something that you had to do differently because the world was different at that time, and now you're like, man, I wish we could do it like that again. Do it.
Do it.
Do it like that again. You just don't have to wear a mask and avoid being within 5 feet of people to do so. I mean, you
Mhm.
can if you want to, rock
I
on.
mean,
But
by all means. Yeah.
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 Speaking of the conference, because you did mention it, I just want to say tickets are live now when you're hearing this. They will have been live for a couple days for the Sacred Spaces gathering. Again, and I just want to say this conference I don't know if the tickets will be sold out or if they won't be sold out. So that's why I'm speaking to it in this kind of way, because it's as when we're recording this, the tickets are not live. So I don't have that information yet.
Mhm.
But I will say this is a smaller conference. We are doing it very small this time to see how it goes and how it vibes, etc. So if the tickets go quick, we are going to do another future one for
Mhm.
sure. It's definitely going to happen. We just don't know when or where or all the details yet. So if for some reason you're like, oh, I tried and I didn't get it, or if you can't make this one or whatever, I do just want to say this isn't your only opportunity. However, we're really excited for this one. Like the vendors that have applied are incredible. Our keynotes are incredible. The
The
workshop
readers.
stuff is going to be so neat. Like I'm just so excited
Yeah.
on all of it. So anyway, check it out. sacredspacesgathering.com.
Yeah. Lots of amazing people have already come together to make this more than we imagined it would be. So it's going
Hmm.
to be, I can't wait. I'm going to have so much fun. And I'm looking forward
Right.
to, I love the idea of being a part of it, but I love the idea of this being a thing that people can go to. So
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. It is a thing that we're doing in January, which is soon,
Yeah.
by the way.
So speaking of traditions, if you want to make a New Year's tradition, so to speak, of,
Yeah.
doing something magical for yourself, that is an opportunity.
Honestly, that's what I recommend every like December, January, like not even like New Year's resolution style, because everyone hits that hard after the first of the year, and we totally understand that. And I'm sure we'll talk about it in a future episode. But if you're in a space where you feel like you're doing everything for everybody else for this time of the year, which trust me, I feel you, birthday,
Mhm.
Christmas season hits hard over here.
Yeah.
Um, we literally have everybody's birthday in the entire family during the month of December, pretty much. So I totally get it. But I always try to do just one thing for me. Historically, like looking back, like that's always the time I enroll in a new course or something, or I purchase a new book that I start reading that's like very focused on my own development, or something like that too is also a really nice tradition to do for yourself. Like while you're giving all this stuff, to give a little bit of something to yourself as well. Of course, as it works, there's a million ways to do this for like no money at all. There's a million ways to do this for like less than $100. There's a million ways to do this for like $5,000. It depends on whatever you want to do and can do. I'm not trying to say like spend money on you. I mean, rock on if you want to, but if you can't, I don't want you to feel pressure. Like we're saying, do a financial investment in you. It doesn't have to be that. It can, but to just honor that little bit of yourself by being like, okay, like I've always wanted to read runes or whatever, so I'm going to buy myself runes and I'm going to start playing with those. Like just a little thing that way, because we give so much of ourselves. I made a very conscious effort very early in my life to decide I was never going to be like the giving tree.
Mm.
So whenever I start feeling very giving tree-esque, I reel it back a little bit to make sure that I replenish my own bucket.
Mhm. Yeah. Super wise.
one of the few books I ever heard Leo. So my mom worked for Leo Biscaglia. If you know who Leo Biscaglia is, he wrote tons of books about love. Was a beautiful, incredible person, who I was very, very close to growing up, like an uncle to me. Precious, wonderful person. But one of the only times, couple different times I've heard him get kind of angry, but one of the only times I heard him like hate a book was The Giving Tree. He was like, "This is disgusting. You're never supposed to give till there's nothing left. What are you teaching children?" Like he would get mad about it. And I always had that memory. And then when I finally understood what that meant as I got older, I was like, oh, we'll never be like The Giving Tree. No.
No, don't be the giving tree. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, super fun. Lots of fun energy. Is there something you're looking forward to during this, like a tradition or something you're looking forward to during the next little bit of time?
I'm I am looking forward to now. This is really funny. One of my favorite things is just having the house to myself, watching baking shows and wrapping Christmas presents for people and like decorating the house for Christmas and having that warm glow, cozy feeling. That's like, and listening to Christmas music, mostly Pentatonics Christmas music, which is
Nice.
great because I can sing along to it. So I will blast that and just walk around the whole house. I bake a special cookie that I make every year. Um, and yeah, I'm going to be dipping into my grandmother's recipe book. We had her do a recipe book a couple of years ago for exactly this moment when we wouldn't have her anymore. And it's all her recipes with her anecdotes in her handwriting. So I'm going to dip into that this year and maybe share some of those and kind of incorporate a little bit of folk magic into it.
Oh, how fun. That sounds lovely. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, let's see. What am I excited for? Well, I always love our winter solstice tradition stuff. That always makes me so, 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 so
We do
happy.
that now too. You inspired us.
Oh, it's the best. It's just so warm and cozy, and we listen to music and just hang out. And it makes me happy. I always work a little bit less during the holidays too, which is nice to have that actual like dedicated space for everybody, which I always honor. My mom makes the best Christmas goodies, so I always look forward to that because I am a food motivated person. I'm really stoked on that. And honestly, I'm kind of just stoked to close out this year. This year. Um, it's not that it was a bad year. It wasn't. It was a good year in so, so, so many ways. But I feel like it's one of those years where I'm like, cool, I could get to January now. When I look at the energy of it, and January actually looks really exciting and electric, not only because we're doing like a bunch of stuff, but just in general, I think for a lot of people, their energy is getting really realized, like this transformation is getting realized in January. And I appreciate that. So I think more than anything, I'm excited to like gather the last few little pieces that I need to gather over the next couple months in order to feel prepared to step into whatever is coming in January, which feels big and significant.
Yeah, I'm about ready to start diving into at the end of the year as an astrologer. It is your job to look at the entirety of the year following and get familiar with the major events that will be coming up. And that's going to be one of my projects once we get settled into the new house, to just really sit down with the astrology of the next year, read the transits and all the things, do the traditions of interpreting the year the way the ancients did, and then also add in my intuition. So
yeah. I always check back in on predictions I made for the year prior and then predictions I make for the year coming up. Which future sight is always so wonky. Like I never get it exactly right because that's not how future sight works. But I always get like iterations of that. I'm like, hey, that was that. Okay, that came over here, and so it's cool to see how it like played out. But yeah, cool. Well, thank you all so much for being here. It is so much fun to get to do these episodes. Also, gonna say it again. We're really close to starting the next cohort of the Forgotten Storytellers. So if you have been kicking this idea around and you're like, oh, I don't know if I'll pitch it, this is your last shot until like next spring. I do recommend you submit your pitch. If it feels aligned, dive in, submit a pitch to us. We would love to work with you and talk about your story idea. Just so you guys know, the way the process works is once you submit a pitch, we go through and see if the pitches feel aligned. We muscle test and basically channel in. If the pitch feels aligned, we set up a one-on-one call with you. So it's with either Krista or myself, where we talk about more about your book idea, what you want to do with it, et cetera, et cetera. And then we talk more in depth about the Forgotten Storytellers, what we do, how we can help you, and then we see if it's aligned. So you submitting a pitch does not mean you say, this is totally aligned for me. You submitting a pitch being like, I think this might be aligned. That's all we're looking for.
Mhm.
So definitely would love to help you write your book. So
Mhm.
by all means, go ahead, submit your pitch. Because we only have like what, a week and a half, 2 weeks left of
Yeah.
before we start the cohort, which is exciting.
And honestly, this is how we heal the world,
Yeah.
through stories, through putting these things out there. If you feel like you want to save humanity and you don't know how to do it, and you think maybe there's a book in you that can help, it
Hmm.
can.
Yeah.
So please pitch it. And if we are the right people to help it go from that concept into creation where it can make a difference, that is what we want to be there for you with.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really wonderful and really exciting. And our one of our forgotten storytellers, Aspen Bassett,
Yeah.
is in the process of crowdfunding for her publishing journey with us, which is really
Mhm.
exciting. We talked more about this on a previous episode, but she's already hit milestones. Like she's taken this in the teeth. It's fantastic, and her book is so good.
Oh
So
my
if you
God.
guys want to go ahead and check out her journey, you can find her on TikTok or Instagram. You can find her through crowdfunding. We are so proud of her. We believe in her story so much, and would love for all of you to be a part of actually getting to experience the written magic that has come from the forgotten storytellers via her work. So
Mhm.
that's
And
that's the other piece.
it is
The
a
magic.
prime example of what
Mhm.
we are always like hoping for in this
Yeah.
program, in this publishing company. She crushed it. And so I can't wait for you guys to be able to read it too.
Yeah. Just amazing. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening. We hope that you take all of this energy of the start of this new month and you
Go make some
go
magic.
make some magic. Yeah, my phone went off at the same time. So I'm saying we did so good.
I'll take it.